and welcome to the Uncultured Nerd Show. My name is Maeve, and I am officially a degree-having Uncultured Nerd. And to celebrate, of course, I forego a night at the bar and instead binge-watched a show I wasn't super interested in to begin with, and honestly, I'm pretty glad I did. To recap, Spiderwick is a book series I read/listened to several times as a child. I did not like the movie the first time I saw it because it changed quite a lot from the book, mostly in the climax, but when I rewatched it this year with a more open mind, I found it to be a pretty above-average adaptation. The most recent version of the story is being brought to us by Roku in a television form with even more changes than were made in the film adaptation, and after watching the first 3 episodes, I was not optimistic for what was coming next. The acting was kind of clunky, the writing felt like a first draft, the effects were passable but not spectacular, and there were so many story and character changes I could barely recognize it as a Spiderwick property. I really did not think anything could make the rest of the show worth watching without starting completely from scratch. And after watching the rest of the episodes, well, it didn't start over and redo everything, but it did get better, and more importantly, I started to realize why they would make a show with so many changes from the original source, instead of just making an original property. That's not to say that this is a great show, I even struggle to call it a good show, but I don't think that's the creative's fault. I can see the show they were trying to make, and from what I can see, I actually kinda like it. The problem is, it's buried underneath a whole lot of budget restrictions and studio problems. So this was originally a Disney Plus show that was bought by Roku for one reason or another. Honestly, I assumed it was because of bad quality, cause why else would a studio want to get rid of a show? Well, given other brilliant studio decisions in the past, it's clear there's a lot more to it than that. And yes, this show is not perfect. Overall, it's kind of a mess, but I'm pretty sure that messiness comes from troubles with the studio. Remember how I said a lot of the scenes seemed like they were the first take? Well, that's usually a sign of a rush production, which I have exactly zero inside information on this, have occurred because of budget cuts and studio interference. And there was a pretty big thing in the finale which pointed to that. By which I mean the entirety of the finale pointed to that. But before we get into the big negative of the show, let's talk about the positives, which became way more numerous as the show went on. Number one positive is the same number one I had in the first 3 episodes, the villain. But actually, he got even better. Mostly because I learned some behind-the-scenes adaptation stuff. In looking more into the show's production history, I found out that not only were Tony DiTerlizzi and Holly Black executive producers on the show, they had quite a bit of creative influence, particularly with the character of Mulgrath. In an interview alongside Kristen Slater, both said that they wanted to explore what wasn't explored in the books or the movies, Mulgrath's backstory. And yeah, Mulgrath's backstory isn't really looked into in either the books or the movies. He's kind of just evil. And that's when I started to realize the problems I had with the adapted changes in the first 3 episodes, at least surrounding Mulgrath, were all kind of necessary to make a more intriguing show, and for a kind of new audience. Do I agree with all these changes? Definitely not, but it's pretty clear the main goal of the series was to reimagine the straightforward, hulking villain of Mulgrath into a complex, psychological, clever nemesis. And honestly, that was accomplished. Mulgrath was already my favorite character in the first 3 episodes, and he is definitely my favorite character after finishing the series. By goodness, Christian Slater was an amazing choice, and in interviews, he really seems passionate about this role. Let's be clear, he's not the character from the book at all, but I really don't mind cause, well, he's kinda better. At least for me, as someone who has somewhat surpassed the intended grade level for the books. Book Mulgrath works really good as a childhood villain, this great big dark force which is a physical menace. Not much complexity, just big scary monster. And for the books and the movies, that's what was required and also what was delivered. But as an adult, I like me some more complex villains. And TV Mulgrath, he's no Joker or Magneto, but he's still got quite a lot of layers added to him which did not appear in the book, and I think that they're really great additions. Some of them are quite tired and cliche, he thinks humans are evil and destroying the planet, yada yada yada, but his origin story is cleverly woven into that more played out storyline. His kind is born from wars of humans. Basically, ogres only appear when the worst of humanity appears, so while they may appear to be monsters and appear here to do monstrous things, their existence is basically the human's fault. If the wars didn't happen in the first place, he wouldn't have been born. He also gets a very Frankenstein's monster life story with people assuming him to be monstrous and savage because of his appearance, and no one will go near him but Arthur Spiderwick. Which is where we come to my biggest excitement and potentially my biggest disappointment with this character, the addition of Mulgrath being friends with Spiderwick. I absolutely love this addition, and the suggestion that Arthur betrayed Mulgrath in some way and categorized him as a monster in his guide while knowing the truth about him, well, that's just really cool and awesome. But like I said, biggest disappointment, there isn't a payoff. At least in this season, and we'll come back to that later. Although Christian Slater and Olivia Alyn Lind remain the standout performances as Mulgrath and Calliope, the rest of the cast, especially the family, did get much better as the episodes went on. Joy Bryant as Helen was always solid, but I really wasn't feeling the kids for quite a while. Michaela Faith Lee as Mallory started to grow on me through her relationship with Bree and Valentina. I still didn't really feel her chemistry with the twins, except for this one scene with Simon where she sees him in real danger while not being able to do anything to save him, and she's really concerned and really becomes that protective older sister. That was probably her best scene in the show. Speaking of the twins, that was the acting I had the most problems with in the first 3 episodes, but both of them did have some really great moments. Of course, they are still clunky dialogue and weird scene setups, which I'm not sure any actors could make work, but their chemistry became a lot more believable, and their scenes apart did get a lot better. Noah Cottrell as Simon definitely had his best scenes with Calliope. Their relationship was corny as hell in some moments, but still quite adorable, and the actors do sell the awkward will they won't they chemistry pretty good. And now with the other twin, Lyon Daniels as Jared, I stand by Freddie Highmore in the movie doing a great job, but the character in the film was simplified to make him more digestible in a shorter time frame. Across 8 episodes of a show, a lot more needs to be explored, and a lot is in this show, which I can only imagine was very difficult to get right, and in my opinion, it was a bit touch and go, but Daniels did eventually get it right. It was episode 6 when his performance started to click with me, and episode 7 when he really shined. That episode is pretty much only focused on him with no side plots going on, and it's just him trying to stay sane while Mulgrath does everything he can to manipulate him. I'll be honest, for this episode, I did half predict the twist. I figured out Emiko was actually Mulgrath, but I didn't see that everyone else was also him. Granted, I am crap at guessing those sorts of things, so maybe it would be more obvious to someone who has a functioning brain. In addition to better performances, the storytelling got quite a bit better. There was much less obvious exposition dumping monologues, and once the plot got going, I was interested in each character's storyline. Mallory's training had some good twists I didn't see coming. Simon's journey to New York and relationship with Calliope was compelling, although the actual confrontation with his dad was a bit heavy-handed in the visual metaphor department. Even though I don't think I should like it, I did dig Helen and Mulgrath. I think the chemistry was there, and I like the explanation, which also ties into the original book. Ogres are so defenseless to compliments that one might just fall in love with someone who compliments them enough. And they still do keep it realistic that he won't give up his plan just because he likes her. She's still getting eaten if she goes against him. I already talked about Jared's more complicated journey with his mental stability and where that takes him. Really like the build-up and the payoff. Along with the character storytelling, the world building also got better. I love the addition of fairies adapting to the human world and living among us. I mean, an underground fairy butcher / gossiper, yeah, that's cool. And then there was this guy. So this guy is weird, and I'm not really sure what his deal is. He helps Lucinda, no questions asked, but he won't help her family. The market he talks about is actually a Winnebago. He really likes teeth and pumpkin spice lattes and rock, paper, scissors. It seems like every aspect of the character was pulled out of a hat of randomness, and maybe that's the point. I can't decide if I like these choices or find them incredibly frustrating, but at the same time, I can't help but laugh at the bizarreness in front of me during his scenes. I'm very curious what a potential season 2 might bring us in terms of other fairies which live among the humans. So yeah, the storytelling, acting, and production quality all seem to get better and better with every episode, until the last one, and not even all the last one, just the last third of it, which, my goodness, let's talk about, 'cause, oh boy, this finale. Finales are hard. They are so difficult, especially when it seems the budget has been cut, which I think is the only way to explain how this climax turned out so bad. Okay, quick unhinged recap of what happened. Spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Basically, Mograth has half the town put to sleep and is preparing to eat them, while the other half are turned into brainless mushroom people who he controls. Helen finally figures out who he is, but he's too powerful and she can't escape the house. The only ones left awake are Jared, Simon, Mallory, Bree, Hatcher, and Calliope, who now just happens to be on their side. Simon fake turns Jared into Mograth so Jared can rescue their mom using the poison apple tea, while Mallory and Bree sneak into the back with a magic sword. Simon and Calliope go ask the fairies for help, and Hatcher tries to save the sleepers before they are prepared for dinner. So yeah, we've got 4 different groups to follow during the climax, and only one of them has somewhat of a good payoff, and even then, it's not even the final payoff which is the good one, it's the midway through payoff. Basically, when Jared does the fake capture thing to get his mother out, Mograth tries to make them both eat dinner, which will turn Jared into a brainless mushroom zombie so he can finally behave. But before Mograth can finish the evil villain monologuing, Thimbletack manages to get the poison apple tea stuff, and it turns them invisible, which they use to escape. And that is the only payoff that works, the payoff with the tea, because they have been building up the tea since the first episode. It takes them to this between spirit world, which is kind of cool, and we get to see Lucinda again in all her flowery glory, and it's a nice moment between mother and son. Aside from that, everything in this whole climax is just one big disappointment after another. Mallory and Bree were built up to have this epic sword fight against Mograth, which, let's talk about. Bree basically wants revenge for Mograth killing her mother, but her revenge feelings make her unworthy to wield the magic sword, so Mallory is now worthy for kind of not very clear reason, but also, she can't win, so luckily Helen crashes in with the car, leaving Mograth defenseless. So Mallory should stab him, right? She's got the sword, the one thing that can kill him. Oh no, we're gonna run away, no stabbing. Okay, Jared did finally figure out how to summon the troll, who hopefully will eat Mograth for them. And you know what incredibly complicated thing gets a troll to come your way? The sound of wind in trees. Yeah, just the sound of wind blowing through the trees, that's it. So is this troll just constantly popping up out of the river and going to investigate every time a breeze comes through? And the wind is very clearly already blowing in this scene. Are his ears just waiting for the sound of humans badly imitating wind, and that's what gets him to come out of his hidey hole? Oh, well, okay, at least now we can get some troll on ogre fighting action, or Mograth's just gonna get eaten immediately, just pulled right out the window in all of his shitty CGI glory. And I mean shitty, like worse than the movie, and that is not a high bar. So yeah, that's a wrap on Mograth, and the day is won, and remember those fairies who wouldn't help fight Mograth? Well, they might not fight, but they will wake some people up. Those people who Hatcher was supposed to be rescuing only to fail miserably and be completely pointless in this whole finale. Did you forget about him? Yeah, me too. And we end with a bunch of happy victory B-roll with some pretty lights and everyone being totally fine. I'll be honest, once I got to this point of the show, I was so mad because I felt betrayed. I went through a bit of a journey with this show. I started off pre-hating it before I saw it, but trying to reserve judgment. Then all my fears became reality in the first couple episodes with only mild amusement from Christian Slater. But then it got better, and I saw what the creators were trying to do. Despite the clear budget limitations and studio problems, I saw something promising, which I really wanted to see more of. And then this whole finale is just, oh my, nah. I was right back to where I started, really hating it, and with only 10 minutes left, how could they fix this? Well, those 10 minutes did quite a lot of heavy lifting. Sort of. The dragon Mograth was raising finally hatches, and Jared is about to kill it, but stops himself, recognizing that it may not be the monster he sees it as. And then Jared runs in. Like, another Jared. Another Jared runs in and says Jared is Mograth, and he's the real Jared, and he proves it by grabbing an iron poker without burning himself. The other Jared turns to the family, only for Mallory to stab him with the magic sword, and he disappears in a cloud of dust. The remaining Jared joins the family in a group hug while covering up his burned hand. So yeah, Jared's dead, and Mograth is now posing as Jared. Can't say I saw that coming, even though I definitely should have, because they literally told us Jared was gonna die soon in episode 6, and I completely forgot they did that. Even though I binged these all in a row, I forgot that they literally told us how the show was gonna end. And I don't think that's my brain being bad. This show intentionally tricks the audience into a sense of security and closure to separate us from the previous knowledge of Jared supposedly dying soon, only to come through in the last few minutes. And I do really like it when a show does that, and I'm really into the possibilities which it brings for a potential season 2. But everything else in the climax feels like they just ran out of money. I I mean, look at this shot. They clearly didn't have the budget or time to do blood on set, so crash cut to shitty CGI leg with shitty CGI blood. Twice. There are moments like that all over the finale, which point to little time and little money. And again, completely going off speculation here. I have no proof whatsoever of my claims, but the show was getting so much better, and then to nosedive into this mess of a finale, it just doesn't make sense without external factors being involved. So after all those ups and steep downs, is the show good? Did it become a good adaptation? Well, I'm probably not gonna watch it again, but I also do want a season 2. Apart from the climax, every episode just got better. So I want to see if they can continue that growth with another season. And with that ending of Jared in the semi-spirit world actually meeting Arthur Spiderwick, there's a lot of fascinating possibilities to explore if given the opportunity. Overall, I wouldn't say it's a great show. Again, struggling to even call it a good show, but I would also struggle to call it a bad show. There is definitely passion here, and the villains in both writing and performance I think are great and very entertaining. So, final verdict, 6.5 out of 10. But that's just as a standalone show. What about as an adaptation? Well, it's not a good adaptation of the source material, because it really doesn't resemble the source material pretty much at all. But what does make this different from other crappy adaptations that strayed from the source is the involvement of the creators. Like I said earlier, Tony DiTerlizzi and Holly Black have been passionately promoting this and have appeared to be heavily involved creatively, especially when it comes to Mulgrath. This doesn't feel like an adaptation of their original book, it feels like an alternate draft. What if Mulgrath was sympathetic? What if he had one henchman instead of an army of goblins? What if his power came from manipulation instead of physical strength? What if Helen was closer to Lucinda and heard the fairy stories growing up? What if Lucinda was killed by Mulgrath? What if parts of the fairy world had adapted around humans? You see what I'm getting at? This is the what if of Spiderwick, and maybe it's something Tony and Holly have wanted to do for a long time. I think I would have preferred it in book form, but it's cool that we got this alternate version. I'm really happy this show didn't become another tax write-off, and I'm really hoping Roku sees the potential for a season 2. So, those are my final thoughts on the Spiderwick TV series. I haven't seen a ton of online discourse on this show, so if anyone has thoughts, feel free to share. I'm curious what others are thinking. Thank you so much to all my fellow freaks for watching, and I'll be back soon with something else. See y'all later.